Party, Pierre Poilievre, am I right? I'm Lynne Findlay. I'm the Member of Parliament for South Surrey White Rock, and I'm on Pierre's leadership team as the Chief Opposition Whip. So I'm the one who keeps everyone, including him, in line. I try. And I grew up here. I was born in Ladysmith and grew up in Nanaimo, went to Oak Bay High. So I'm always happy to be back on Vancouver Island. So thank you for the warm welcome. It's wonderful. I want to just say a couple of things about Pierre's vision, and he'll be out in a moment, because he does have a vision. And it is to restore Canada's promise. And one way to do that is to get back to a Canada that rewards hard work. And another thing he's fighting for is for Canadians to get back control of their lives. He is fighting to stop the out-of-control inflationary spending that has been going on with the Liberal government, so out of control that we have 40-year high inflation and life is just unaffordable. He's also fighting hard to remove the gatekeepers, because we want to get back to where we build things, we make things in Canada, right here at home. We should be services, goods, and energy independent in Canada. We could be, and that is worth fighting for. He is also fighting to restore safe streets. We just lost 2 police officers in Edmonton. A shop owner in Nanaimo just got shot in the stomach because he was trying to get his stolen goods back. This is not good enough for Canada. It has to stop. Catch and release bail system has to stop. And we will do that. You know, Pierre believes in a country where the state is the servant and the people of Canada are the masters. And so as he fights on, and with your support, we want to see a Canada under Pierre's leadership where Ottawa gets out of the way of Canadians' futures. And the way to do that, and what you will have afterward, is smaller government and bigger citizens. Please join me in welcoming the next Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you very much, Sidney, Victoria, boys. It's ever great to be here. It's better than going surfing in Tofino, isn't it? Wow, what a crowd. They all told me there were no conservatives in Sidney, Victoria. We're proving them wrong, aren't we? I think we're going to be turning this riding from green to blue as we turn Canada from red to blue. All of you are very precious to me, but none more than my very own father, who's right here sitting in the front row, Donald Poilievre. Donald était un enseignant francophone français de Calgary. Il est né en Saskatchewan, and he taught me my way with words. So you have him to blame for all the trouble I caused in the floor of the House of Commons. When I started off in politics, I asked him if he had any advice on how to be successful on Parliament Hill. And on his wall, he had mounted a fish that he caught in the Bow River in Calgary. And he pointed up at that fish and he said, "Pierre, you see that guy up there? If he kept his mouth shut, he'd still be alive." I never followed his advice, but I thought it was pretty good. Behind me, we have this 1945 amphibian. What a beauty, eh? Apparently it's outfitted with an entire camper back there. You can live in the thing. So what do you think? Should I take it back to Ottawa with me? Take it across the country? We've got a lot of traveling to do to take our message from coast to coast to coast. You know why? Because we had a deal. We had a deal in this country. You work hard, you get a house, good food, a good living, and a great life. That was the Canadian deal. I was born to a teenage mother, 16 years old, who put me up to adoption for 2 school teachers who taught me that it didn't matter in Canada where you came from, it mattered where you were going. It didn't matter who you knew, it mattered what you could do. That's the country that my wife came to as a refugee. It's the country we want our children and yours to inherit. But it's the country we see slipping away more and more each day. 9 in 10 of our young people say they will never be able to afford a house. In a nation with the 2nd biggest landmass on planet Earth, we have more land, labor, and lumber than anyone. And yet we cannot house our youth. Under Trudeau's 8 years, a mortgage payment has doubled from on average $1,400 to $3,200. It used to be cheap to get a home in Canada, and why wouldn't it be? We have the most land per capita of any country in the entire G7, and yet the fewest houses somehow built on that land. And so we have single mothers who are skipping meals so that their children don't have to. Food prices so high now that 1 in 5 Canadians are actually cutting meals from their diet, and 1 in 2 are actually cutting back on groceries. More and more of our working people can't take a... Look, it's enough to make a little baby cry. Wait until she finds out her share of the national debt. What's her name? Naomi. And what's Naomi going to do when she grows up?
Oh, something successful.
Okay, so she's definitely not going to be a politician. Maybe we'll need her to clean up the mess.
Maybe.
No, because we're going to clean up the mess a lot faster than that, aren't we? So people feel like they're losing control of their lives in this country where you can't afford food, housing, or the basic necessities of life, where inflation is rising faster than any time in 40 years. This is 8 years of Justin Trudeau, and now his costly coalition with the NDP. A party that used to stand for the working people of the land now stands up for the woke corporate elite in downtown Toronto and on Parliament Hill. People feel like they're losing control of their government as they see foreign powers inserting themselves in our politics and imposing their radical ideologies on the people. A top-down ideology that puts the elites on top and the people on the bottom. That's why I've launched my new campaign to bring it home. To bring home lower prices, bring home powerful paychecks, bring home safe streets, and bring home our democracy and our freedom back to Canada. Bring home lower prices by reversing the inflationary policies that caused them to rise to begin with. We know why we have inflation. It has nothing to do with Russia and Ukraine. We do less than 0.3% of our economy is trade with those two countries, and everything they make we have here in Canada. That's nothing but a distraction and an excuse. We have inflation in Canada because of $500 billion of inflationary deficits. You print more money to bid up fewer goods, you always get higher prices. This is an irrevocable relationship that has existed in economics for thousands upon thousands of years. Every single emperor, king, queen, prime minister, president that has ever printed money to pay their bills has led to inflation, which is great news if you're wealthy, because all your assets increase in value. But if you're a working person, it robs your paycheck of its purchasing power. It's a transfer of wealth from the have-nots to the have-yachts. That is what is happening in this country, as more and more wealth is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And that is exactly as it is intended to be. That is the real policy agenda that they are pushing, to take from the working people and give to the elite. So what are we going to do? We're going to cap government spending with a new dollar-for-dollar law that requires government find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. It's the same rule you follow in your household finances. You will, yes, you will give out around the clock. If you want to build a new balcony, you might skip the vacation, or you might go to the local lumber yard and see if they have some stuff on sale, and they get a deal on your vacation. So you can do both, but within the same budget. You make trade-offs. That's how every creature in the universe lives, with the universal law of scarcity. Every single creature except the politician, who can simply pass scarcity on to everyone else in the form of higher taxes, debt, and inflation. No more. We will bring in this hard cap on spending so that politicians have to make those trade-offs. You've been pitching your pennies for long enough. It's time the federal government started pitching its pennies for you.
$1,000 a night in the hotel.
This government is spending $21 billion on consultants. Many of them make $5,000 a day for one person. They've doubled the budget for consultants. That works out to $1,400 for every family in Canada. Every one of these families in this room is spending $1,400 in federal taxes for consultants alone. Consultants like McKinsey, Justin Trudeau's favorite firm, making big money, doing work that should be done inside of the public service, which itself has grown by 30%. So here's what we're going to do. Fire the high-priced consultants, bring the work inside the government, get the public servants to do their job, save the money, and pass those savings on to you. Arrive Can Act to save some money. And we'll save $1 billion by defunding the CBC. Now we know that Justin Trudeau is the root cause of inflation, just inflation. That's why it's called just inflation, right? It's named that for a reason, but he also got the central bank to do his money printing for him. The bank is supposed to be independent. When I'm Prime Minister, we will have an independent central bank whose singular purpose is protecting the purchasing power of your money by keeping inflation low. We will not create more cash than there are goods and services to buy with it. But our central bank governor went out and printed cash for Justin Trudeau to spend. He didn't do his job, he did Justin Trudeau's bidding. And I said I was going to fire him during my leadership race. You know, all the big shots in Ottawa were beside themselves. How could you fire a big shot banker? I said to them, you ever been to a restaurant? What happens if the waitress doesn't do her job? She gets fired. What happens if an electrician causes a short circuit over at an office building? He gets fired. Guess what? In the real world, if you don't do your job, I'm going to be bringing the real world to Ottawa. I will be firing the central bank governor. We're not going to let the government take over our financial lives either. We're not going to have you depositing your money in a government bank controlled and surveilled by government authorities. A Poilievre government will prevent the central bank from digital currency. We will bring it down below 2% because you earned your money. That is your dollars, and it is theft for government to cause inflation to take it away. When Poilievre is Prime Minister, we will bring home common sense. We will bring home lower prices. And you know what else we'll bring home? Powerful paychecks. We're going to end the war on work. We have a war on work in this country. You're a $60,000 a year worker, a single mom with 3 kids. You go out and earn another dollar, you lose 80 cents in clawbacks of your child benefit, payroll tax, income tax, gas tax, and carbon tax to get to work. 80 cents on the dollar. So if you're $25 an hour wage, you lose $20 to clawbacks and taxes. So your actual take home is $5 an hour, well below minimum wage in Canada. We wonder why we have a labor shortage. You punish work, you get less work. You know, a fine is something you pay when you do something wrong. A tax is something you pay when you do something right. You work hard, you get punished. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. A Poilievre government is going to end the war on work by cutting taxes and clawbacks, reforming the system so work pays and you bring home more of every single dollar you earn. Paychecks by bringing back our industries to this country. You know, Trudeau is shipping jobs and opportunities away. Just today, a major natural gas export plant that was proposed for New Brunswick decided they've thrown up their hands and they're not going to bother going forward. They can't keep up with the costs that this government imposes on them. When Trudeau took office, there were 15 proposed natural gas liquefaction and export plants on his desk. 0 have been completed. In the States, 7 are done. The Qataris are taking control of the global market. And of course, the Russians dominate all of Europe in this space. We could be doing it. We have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right beneath our feet here in Canada. We're the 6th biggest owners of gas anywhere on Earth, but we don't export a single solitary cubic foot of natural gas overseas. Why? Because Trudeau's Bill C-69 prevents construction of those plants from ever happening. We have massive advantages. We have the shortest shipping distance to Asia and Europe from North America. And because of our cold weather, it's actually 25% cheaper to liquefy gas here than it is to do it in the southern United States and the Gulf Coast. But you don't know anything about cold weather out here. Stop your complaining. You don't know a thing about it. It doesn't get cold here. In Ottawa, it gets cold. In fact, Mark Dalton will tell you that in Ottawa, it got so cold this last winter, Justin Trudeau was seen with his hands in his own pockets. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to repeal C-69, the anti-energy law, so that we can build the natural gas liquefaction plants, lower the gas's temperature down to minus 161 degrees so that it turns into liquid. We'll put it on ships, send it to Asia to shut down coal-fired plants and replace it with clean Canadian gas, and send it off to Europe to break the European dependence on Putin, and we'll turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people in this country. With Canadian steel to take Canadian energy to Canadian markets. We'll end our reliance on overseas oil by allowing Newfoundland to double its daily production so that we can fully replace the 130,000 barrels of overseas oils that we're bringing into Canada every single day. We'll produce our minerals in this country, and a Poilievre government will crack down on takeovers of our farmland, our minerals, our fisheries by hostile foreign powers. We are going to bring home control of our waters, our land, and our rocks. This is our country, my friends. And we're going to bring home safe streets again, aren't we? Safe streets. We're going to bring home safe streets where people can feel at peace. I landed in Nanaimo. We got here from Vancouver, hopped on a little pontoon plane, arrived here, and within about 5 minutes I realized how crazy it's gotten here in Vancouver Island. So, first story, someone gets off the plane, hands me their phone with a picture from their security camera. A couple of addicts were in his backyard 2 nights earlier at 2 in the morning doing meth, carrying around large machetes and rummaging around for valuable goods that they could steal. He had it right on his camera and on his phone. Then I walked a little further and I heard that there was a man from Nanaimo who had his tools stolen. by someone staying in the permanent encampment. So he went to get his tools back and got attacked, and now he's in a coma in a hospital. And then I picked up the Nanaimo newspaper, and they said the number of people who died in Nanaimo of overdoses in January doubled from the January before. I thought as COVID moved further and further into the distance, and the lockdowns were a more distant memory, that people were going to start to get their health back and the drug use was going to decline. Instead, it's actually getting worse. This is not an accident, my friends. This is the obvious result of a liberal policy which was supported by the NDP to flood our streets with repeat, dangerous, violent offenders and even more deadly drugs. They brought in the liberal bail reform, which allows criminals to get out of jail the same day they're arrested, even if they have long rap sheets of dozens of previous convictions. They laugh at the police officers. They say, "Officer, you're arresting me at 9 a.m., I'll be out by noon." And then they're arrested at noon, and then they're out by dinner time. Sometimes they commit 3 offenses in the same day. Do you know the same 40 offenders were arrested 6,000 times in 1 year in Vancouver alone? 40 offenders, 6,000 arrests. That's 150 arrests per offender per year. This is an obvious result of when Trudeau brought in a system that lets people out on jail automatically, even if they have dozens of prior offenses. So here's the Poilievre plan to bring home safe streets. We are going to bring in bail reform, that if you have a long rap sheet of violent offenses and you're newly arrested for a serious crime, you stay behind bars until your trial is held and your sentence is complete. We're going to bring on safe. And then there's the drugs. The drugs. Unbelievable. We have a massive opioid crisis that has taken the lives of 30,000 of our brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors since Justin Trudeau took office. 30,000 more have been hospitalized. Now we know how this all started. Greedy pharmaceutical companies came to North America and lied to the regulators, lied to the hospitals, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the pharmacists in order to push these opioids as a safe and non-addictive solution to any ache and pain you might have. And so people who went in with a sore back were prescribed OxyContin and other opioids. And they found that it not only made their ache and pain go away, it made all their worries go away. But then they had to take a little bit more, and a little bit more, and then the stronger stuff. And they moved up from OxyContin to heroin, to fentanyl, and ultimately to their graves. And the policy that the Liberals have taken has been now to legalize heroin, crack, cocaine, and illicit fentanyl, flooding our streets. And now they're using taxpayer dollars to hand this stuff out. The story is now coming out of the people getting the tax-funded hydromorphine, ripping off the labels, selling that morphine to students, high school students, taking the profits to buy fentanyl. And it is no surprise that this has led to a massive crisis. So here's the Poilievre plan for that. We're going to stop giving out taxpayer-funded drugs. We're going to ban heroin, crack, cocaine, and other dangerous drugs.
It's illegal to walk down the street with an open beer, but not 2.5 grams of meth.
And we're also going to invest in treatment. I met with a young lady. Yes, treatment and recovery. Treatment and recovery. Treatment and recovery. We're going to bring our brothers and sisters home, aren't we? They're going to come home drug-free. I met a lady in Timmins. She's a waitress. She was a nurse. She got hooked on opioids, lost her home, her daughter, her family, but she got treatment. She took back control of her life. Now she has her daughter back and is setting a beautiful example for her child. We're going to open up beautiful treatment facilities with detox and counseling and a life plan to give people back control of their lives, my friends. There's always hope. There's always hope. And we're going to bring hope home. And you know how we're going to pay for it? We're going to send the bill to the corrupt pharma companies. These corporate dirtbags knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing because we have their documents now. The American government sued them and found that they had devious plans to sell these drugs and deliberately cause overdoses. McKinsey was the consulting firm that advised the companies on how they could turbocharge the sales. And they even offered bonuses to the distributors for each overdose that they caused. They were incentivizing the death of our working class people. The American government sued them as they've collected over $50 billion south of the border. We sued the tobacco companies when they ruined our healthcare system by giving people cancer. A Poilievre government will launch a massive $45 billion lawsuit against Big Pharma to collect the money and will put it in the treatment and recovery for people. We're going to bring home our brothers and sisters safely from addiction, and we're going to hopefully have homes to bring them to, right? We're going to start building houses in this country again. As I said, we have the fewest houses per capita in Canada of any G7 country, even though we have the most land. Boy, I organized a flyover here. Hear that rumble. But we're going to bring homes that people can afford. And I'll tell you how we'll do it. The problem right now is that the government gatekeepers stand in the way of housing construction. In the city of Vancouver, government regulation, taxes, development charges add up to $600,000 for every unit of housing. 600 grand of every house, every condo is actually not material, labor, or even the dirt under our feet. It's actually just bureaucracy. They don't want more construction. They want to protect privileged neighborhoods. The aristocrats who live behind the castle walls get to protect themselves from having any neighbors. But meanwhile, those outside the castle walls are left living in homeless poverty or renting 400 square foot apartments, living in their mom's basement. I asked a crowd in Vancouver, what do you do if you're 35 and you're living in your mom's basement? How do you even bring home a date? And a lady said, very carefully. But you think of the psychological damage it does if you can't own a home, you can't start a family, you can't build credit history or collateral. We need to restore the dream of home ownership, and this is how we're going to do it. A Poilievre government will link the number of infrastructure dollars a city gets to the number of houses it allows to be completed. Yay! Those cities that block housing construction will get fined by clawing back their federal infrastructure money. But those that get out of the way and let builders build will get a building bonus with extra infrastructure dollars to incentivize the construction. Every single federally funded transit station will have to be pre-approved for high-density apartments and condos so that our young people and seniors don't have to even own a car. We're also going to make it possible to build new residences in former government headquarters. We have these big, ugly government buildings that are largely empty, 37,000 of them. I'm going to sell off 15% of them and turn them into housing. And you know something? It warms my heart to think of the beautiful family pulling up in their U-Haul to move into their wonderful new home in the former headquarters of the CBC. Remember they said you'll own nothing and be happy? We're not going to have any of that. We're going to be bringing home freedom to our country. What does that mean, bring home freedom? Where's our freedom gone? Well, it starts with foreign interference, hasn't it? We have Beijing interfering in our elections here in Canada to help Justin Trudeau win elections. It started with a $200,000 donation that Beijing gave to the Trudeau Foundation. You know, the Trudeau Foundation, right? The same Trudeau Foundation where Justin goes to find the people he wants to investigate the Beijing's interference. And there's nobody else in Canada out of 37 million people that could possibly investigate this interference but people who work for the Trudeau Foundation, which is funded by Beijing, right? The same organization, the same dictatorship in China helped Trudeau in the 2019 election and the 2021 election. These are not my allegations. These come right out of CSIS documents that are now spilling onto the pages of our newspapers. Now, they funneled clandestine sums of money. I asked Justin Trudeau, how much money did the Liberal Party get from the communist government in Beijing? He won't answer. I asked him, how much money did his leadership campaign get from the communist dictatorship in Beijing? He won't answer. It should be a very straightforward answer, right? If he ain't got nothing to hide, well, he obviously has something to hide, and that's why he's preventing a public inquiry from going ahead. A Poilievre government, and in fact, a Poilievre-led opposition will continue the fight tooth and nail to get a public inquiry, because Canadians deserve to know what interference happened and to make sure it never happens again. Stalling, you almost think he might want it to happen again. There's another election that could happen just around the corner, and if we haven't solved the problem before then, we'll obviously have more interference by Beijing to help Justin Trudeau get elected. If he really wanted a fair election, if he really wanted us to have Canadians choosing their own government, he would be taking immediate action to stop the interference. We have examples of Chinese Canadians terrified because of the intimidation of the communist government in Beijing. Lynne Findlay can tell you stories, knocking on doors and having people tell her, put your phone down, let's go into the backyard and talk, because they're listening here in Canada. On our soil. Chinese-controlled police stations, 7 of them. Can you imagine if the FBI opened up police stations in Ottawa? We'd all be up in arms. What are these Americans? Who do these Americans think they are? We'd all be saying. But when a communist dictatorship does it, it doesn't seem to bother Justin Trudeau at all. You gotta wonder, why is it that the government in Beijing is so determined to keep Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister? It's a good question. Maybe is it because he admires the basic communist dictatorship in China? That's what he said. He admires Fidel Castro. That's the radical ideology to which Justin Trudeau subscribes, and we are all paying the price for that ideology. We're going to bring home democracy back in this country by bringing in a foreign influence registry. You have to register if you want to lobby on behalf of the food bank in Canada or on behalf of the United Way. Don't you think it's fair that you should have to register if you're lobbying on behalf of a hostile foreign dictatorship? That's what's going to happen when I'm playing this. We'll make our own decisions here in Canada. And that's why I've made it clear that a Poilievre-led government will ban all of its ministers, all of its MPs, and all of the senior members of the bureaucracy from any involvement in the World Economic Forum. We're going to make sure that there is no digital ID imposed on Canadians. And we're going to make sure I can keep giving speeches like this, not just in person, but on the internet. They've got this censorship law, Bill C-11, that would allow the woke bureaucracy at the CRTC to control what you see and say online. Government would then be able to manipulate the algorithms to determine what shows up in your YouTube or your Facebook feed. Manipulating algorithms with the purpose of promoting what they call Canadian content. But what is Canadian content? Well, I think that any Canadian who posts something online is producing Canadian content. We have 37 million Canadian content regulators. They're called Canadian citizens. We're going to put them back in charge. We have something called Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Freedom of expression. Section 2B. To be or not to be? That is the question. A Poilievre government has a very clear answer. We will respect freedom of speech, we will repeal C-11, and we will mandate freedom of expression on university campuses right across this country. Peterson for being a psychologist. You know, they tried to kick him off the University of Toronto campus because he had politically correct views that didn't conform to the woke mentality that is imposed from above. You know, my view is this. You don't agree with Jordan Peterson, debate him. Good luck with that. You can try. But you see, the woke left really doesn't want to debate anybody because they know they lose. As Margaret Thatcher says, the reason socialists don't like when the people choose is because they know the people won't choose socialism. So they have to ban the debate. And in order to make government big, they have to make the people small. That's why Justin Trudeau's always insulting the people. He calls them racist and misogynist if they disagree with him on vaccines. What does that have to do with the science behind vaccines? Nothing at all. It has to do with the political science of closing ranks and creating more political control for him. You see, their entire ideology is based on the assumption that there's a small group on top who are made of better clay, and that we must, the unwashed masses, should instead just do what they are told. Because they're not as smart, they don't know as much, they're not as enlightened. So just give everything over to the elites. That's the thinking. But we know from the evidence that the common sense of the common people is much more powerful than the so-called elite knowledge of the insiders on top. Look at this airplane over here. Look at this airplane over here. Just give me a second here. Let's reflect on the history of air travel. When did we get the first heavier than air flying machine, the first airplane? Anybody know? 1903. Got a smart common man back here, right? So, at the beginning of the century, if you had asked anyone who's going to invent the first airplane, they all would have said the same person, Samuel Pierpont Langley. He was a friend of the President of the United States, a regular at the White House, a good personal friend of Alexander Graham Bell. He was the 4th Secretary of the Smithsonian. He had the biggest grant that the U.S. War Department had ever provided, all for the purpose of inventing an aircraft that could fly, that was heavier than air and could carry a man. So he was obviously the one that would do it. And most important, his competition were a couple of simple guys from Ohio. A couple of brothers. They owned a bicycle shop. And they worked in their little shed trying to plan how they could create a plane. And so the two different teams set off on their race to make men fly. And how did they do it? Well, here Samuel Langley hired a big staff, went to a lot of conferences, attended a lot of meetings, met with a lot of important government officials. These two brothers from Ohio, they got busy in their shack. They studied how seagulls flew so that they could understand the aerodynamics of flight. They then created little airplanes out of small sticks and pieces of wood, and they put them in tiny wind tunnels that were created by fans powered by gas because they didn't even have electricity in their sheds. And then they took those little airplanes and they made them into bigger ones, and they transported them with a whole pile of wood all the way over to North Carolina, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And they created gliders. They had to bring extra wood because they knew they'd crash these gliders so many times that they'd have to rebuild them. One brother would run holding on to the wing as the other one was inside, and they'd go down Kildown hills again and again, crashing over and over again. So what happened? Well, in early December of 1903, Samuel Pierpont Langley launched his flying machine off the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., the capital of government, with all the important eyes there to see it. He went straight up in the air, straight down into the water, and sunk to the bottom of the river. He buried his head in his hands and said his life was a failure, and he gave up. 1 week later, the two brothers launched their aircraft, and it too crashed. But they did not give up. For the next 2 days, they would work nonstop to reassemble that aircraft. And on December 17th, 1903, the first flying machine would take flight, and man would be given wings and taken to the skies. This beautiful story of entrepreneurship reminds us of the triumph of the citizen over the state, the individual over the institution, the entrepreneur over the bureaucracy. See, because since the dawn of our species, we have gazed up to the heavens in admiration of the birds, But in this wonderful story, we learn that the citizen, two brothers, the Wright brothers, did what the mighty state could not: give man wings and make him fly. That is the triumph of the common man and the common woman. You see, if you want to see greatness, don't always look up. Look around you. You will see that greatness in the common people, the quiet ones, the ones who say little but do much. They're often called ordinary people, but they are not ordinary. They are extraordinary. The farmer, who must master the sciences of the soil, the storms of the sky, and the commodity prices of the world to bring the food from his farm to your fork, is not ordinary. He is extraordinary. The electrician who sends lightning bolts firing through copper wires to illuminate your home, he is not ordinary. He is extraordinary. The single mother working as a waitress who serves 15 tough customers at once, is on her feet all day, comes home and helps her kid with math and balances her family budget on a minimum wage. She is not ordinary. She is extraordinary. We must remember that. I used to get tired of all the door knocking I had to do in this business. And I asked one about what it really meant. And one day I knocked on the door of this lady and we had this beautiful conversation. She was an immigrant from Cuba. And as we were talking about normal things around the neighborhood, she suddenly broke into tears. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing, I'm so happy." I said, "Why are you happy?" She said, "Because in the place I come from, people like you never come and talk to people like me." That is what's special about this country. Door knocking by a politician is actually a revolutionary act when you think about it. For thousands of years, the citizen had to go and kneel before Caesar, knock on his door and ask for things. In our democracy, the org chart is reversed. It is the politician that has to go and seek the support of the people, to beg for their support and their endorsement. That means that you are the boss. That's how the system works. It's all about who's in charge. It's about putting you back in charge of your life and your country. And that is why I am running for Prime Minister, my friends. I am a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind. Thank you very much. God bless you.